From Arizona, Mr. Stanton, and the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 1082 as amended.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 1082 as amended. I applaud the gentleman from New Jersey, Representative Smith, for having his tenacity to get this bill to the House floor for its consideration today. The gentleman and his staff have worked tirelessly through many iterations of this bill. We are here today to take the first steps towards ensuring the safety of passengers and drivers who utilize ride-hailing platforms. Specifically, we are here to pass Sami's Law, a bill to honor and remember Samantha Josephson. Sami, a 21-year-old college student, was brutally murdered after she entered a car that she mistakenly thought was the Uber that she ordered. Her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, have shared their heart-wrenching story firsthand with so many of us on Capitol Hill. Throughout their grief, they have been committed to working so that no other family will have to go through this kind of pain, and that millions of people who use ride-hailing services can do so with safety protections in place. Mobility and transportation patterns in many cities have been upended in recent years by companies that, through transformative technology platforms, have revolutionized how we travel. In a very short time, many people have come to rely upon transportation network companies, or TNCs, such as Uber and Lyft, as a regular transportation option. These services, however, have operated with little transportation safety or regulatory oversight. There are many aspects of TNCs that the Committee on Transportation has examined, including their impacts on congestion, on wages, and on public transportation use, as well as gaps in regulatory oversight of TNCs and drivers. We held a hearing in 2020 where we examined a number of troubling aspects of the TNC model. While the bill under consideration today is a scaled-back version of legislation as introduced, it marks an important step in oversight of TNCs. H.R. 1082, as amended, prohibits the sale of any signage that is designed to help a passenger identify a TNC vehicle or that contains TNC's proprietary trademark or logo unless authorized by the TNC. The bill also directs the Government Accountability Office to conduct a study of the incidence of assaults, including sexual assaults, on TNC passengers and TNC drivers. In addition, it directs the GAO to study the type of background checks conducted on prospective drivers of TNC vehicles, including any state and local laws which may require such background checks. Strong and thorough vetting of potential drivers is the first line of defense to ensure passenger safety. The study initiated by this bill will yield important data and will inform decisions on what more needs to be done to protect the ride-hailing community. Lawmakers at the federal, state, and local level will need to think beyond whether ride-hailing gets people from point A to point B and work to ensure that TNC drivers delivers a public service safely and equitably. I support this important legislation and urge my colleagues to do the same, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of this legislation known as Sami's Law, and to applaud the dedication and efforts of the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, who worked tirelessly on this legislation. As amended, Sami's Law prohibits the unauthorized sale of transport network company ride-hailing signage, authorizes enforcement policies, and requires the Government Accountability Office to study incidents of physical and sexual assault of passengers and drivers of TNC vehicles, taxicabs, and other for-hire vehicles. Sami's Law will protect passengers and drivers of TNCs and for-hire vehicles and will ensure important data is collected on TNC-related assault and abuse. I urge support of this legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 10 minutes to the sponsor of this bill, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I thank you, my good friend, for yielding, for his leadership. I thank my friend on the other side of the aisle. Madam Speaker, in late March of 2019, University of South Carolina senior Samantha Josephson, Sami to friends and family, left a late-night outing with her friends alone because she had to work in the morning. The extraordinarily talented student who had just earned a full scholarship to Drexel University Law ordered an Uber. In a congested part of Columbia known as 5 Points, a predator pretending to be her Uber driver took her in his car and brutally murdered her. Less than 24 hours later, Sami was found dead in a field. The murderer, Nathaniel Rowland, was caught, and in a heart-wrenching trial of July of 2021, Rowland was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Presiding Circuit Court Judge Clifton Newman noted the, quote, horrific and most brutal nature of Sami's murder and said, quote, it's the most severe murder that has occurred that I have been a witness to as far as presiding in court or participating in as a lawyer. Almost immediately, however, after her death, and notwithstanding their excruciating agony over the loss of their precious daughter, Sami's parents, Seymour and Marcy, began pushing for comprehensive new protection policies at Uber and Lyft and legislation to ensure to the maximum extent possible that no one else is ever killed, raped, or assaulted by a rideshare driver. They created the What's My Name Foundation in, quote, honor of their daughter to educate the world on rideshare safety. Samantha may be gone, they wrote, but our goal for the rest of our time on earth is to ensure her story and make a lasting change. Seymour and Marcy have and are making a lasting change. Their advocacy has saved lives and made so many more of us situationally aware of the dangers of using Uber and Lyft. For more than 3 years, almost 4 now, especially given the pain due to the unimaginable loss of their daughter, Seymour and Marcy have been heroic, tenacious, and selfless. They have inspired modest reforms by Uber and Lyft, but are the first to say that so much more needs to be done. Marcy and Seymour have made frequent trips to the Capitol to meet lawmakers and staff from both sides of the aisle, including Speaker Pelosi and Leader McCarthy, as well as Transportation and Infrastructure Chairman DeFazio, Ranking Member Graves, and Subcommittee Chairs Norton and Ranking Member Davis. Ranking Member Kathy McMorris, when she met with them, was so greatly moved to tears when they told their horrible story about what happened to their daughter. And I'm grateful that Chairman Pallone has waived the bill through the Energy and Commerce Committee today to ensure its consideration. I am grateful that the Speaker, for her strong commitment to this cause, and there was that empathy. You felt it when you were in the room. They said, what can we do? And we have to do as much as humanly possible. So I thank that. And I want to offer my special thanks to Tom Suozzi for his tremendous support and for being the lead Democratic co-sponsor all these years on this legislation. Robert Edmondson with the Speaker and Ryan Long with Kevin McCarthy have also, and other staff members have just done stellar work trying to push this and additional reforms forward, because hopefully we're not done. The need for Sami's Law is absolutely compelling, I tell my colleagues. I ask all of us, do any of us really believe that ride-sharing, particularly late at night, particularly around college campuses, especially for women, is it safe when you're on an Uber or Lyft? It is a big open question. 2 reports released by Uber found that over a 4-year period, from 2017 to 2020, there were 9,805 allegations of serious sexual assault by Uber drivers in the United States, and 39 people were killed in physical assaults during or soon after an Uber ride. Lyft's own safety record revealed 4,158 allegations of sexual assault in a 3-year period from 2017 to 2019. In September, NPR reported that, quote, Lyft is facing 17 new lawsuits brought by users of its service from around the country who claim the company failed to protect passengers and drivers from physical and sexual assault. The new lawsuits come 3 years after 14 other women filed suit against Lyft, claiming that after being sexually assaulted or raped by drivers, Lyft failed to take action, even when it was aware of drivers who were accused of assault and purposely ignored victims' reports. Not a stellar record. Just last week, Isaiah Bowden, a 70-year-old woman from North Carolina, jumped out of a moving lift vehicle and ended up in the emergency room out of fear that her driver, who made several disturbing comments, was trying to drug her. She was only a few miles away from her home. Sami's law under consideration by the House today is an important first step to enhance safety for both passengers and drivers and to mitigate future violence. Sami's law makes unlawful the unauthorized selling or offering for sale of ride-sharing signage, making it more difficult for imposters like Sami's murderer to pose as rideshare drivers. Let me just point out, when Tom Swazi testified before the T&I committee, Chairman DeFazio, when we talked about this factor, you go to Amazon, Walmart, and get a sign that says you're an Uber driver. He texted as we were talking or went online and said, there it is. I could buy an Uber sign. And you know, you would think the companies would want to control the signage. Well, this legislation will ensure and make it illegal to sell it in those outlets and anywhere else, unless approved by the companies. Sami's law also requires the GAO to investigate and provide an independent, comprehensive report to Congress on the incidents of assault and abuse of both passengers and drivers, and to do it annually. Requires that the GAO examine the nature of and specifics of background checks conducted by companies and the varying standards set by states regarding background checks. We want to know, what are they doing to find out who their drivers are? We've asked the hard questions. The answers have not been all that good. It also assesses safety steps thus far taken by rideshare vehicles, taxis, and for other vehicles for hire. I am disappointed to say that opposition from Uber and Lyft has resulted in dropping other life-saving provisions that were in the original bill. That was passed by the House in the last Congress, with Tom Swazi and I leading on that as well. One required Uber and Lyft and other transportation network companies to implement a simple digital method of verifying that the passenger and driver have been specifically matched by the TNC prior to the ride beginning. So that match is made right before you take off. Yes, that is who the driver should be, and the person behind has ordered that Uber. It also gives a record going forward if any kind of assault does indeed occur. The opposition to this digital security feature is mind-boggling to me. Uber has the technology and even a program in place, but they offer it only as an opt-in program, a program so well hidden that few riders even know about it. Our legislation passed in July of 2020 said that transportation companies may offer a passenger an option out, opt out. If you want to be out of it, get out of it. But the default would be you're in it, and it's all for your protection. It's like safety belts. You know, there was a time when that was controversial. But now we all put them on, and the buzzer goes off or the bell or the ring if you don't have that on. The second provision that we lost was Sami's counsel, which would simply empower a working group to continually make upgrades as to how better to utilize all of this. Let me just say finally, Marcy and Seymour at the sentencing part, or before that, at the trial, they inspire us, but they also spoke, and I'll only read a few of their words that they said. I remember watching it on television, and it just broke my heart. And here's what Marcy said. I close my eyes and feel what she endured in his hands. He stabbed her, remember, 120 times. Over and over and over, fighting for her life, locked in his car. I used to have dreams for her, now all I have is nightmares, 120 times. The final moments, her bare feet kicking and fighting for her life. I visualized blood flowing from her body, her joyful body, 120 times. For what? The $35 a college student has in her bank account? The excruciating pain she goes on, put her through, is unimaginable. In 1 second, our lives changed. Her death sliced through my heart. In his statement, Seymour questioned how this could have happened at all, challenging us to prevent it in the future. Again, they have spent so much time, dedicated their lives to this. Nobody else ever has to go through this. He said at the trial, I have repeated nightmares and visions of him, the monster, stabbing her. I have visions of her foot on the back window. I have visions of her screaming and fighting. I have visions of her taking her last breath. I stand here in bewilderment asking how in the world did we get here? That night of her kidnapping and murder, She called me about using my credit card because supposedly hers didn't work with Uber or Lyft. I look at my wife, and she's not even close to being the same. I have lost a huge piece of her along with Samantha. Every day I look at her and only wish I could do something to take that pain away. So I asked my colleagues in Sami's Law, today we act to protect rideshare passengers and their drivers, and we take an important first step to safeguard others from the unspeakable pain that Seymour and Marcy Josephson now endure. I yield back, and I thank the chair. And I thank you.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the congressional record a letter from the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee agreeing to waive consideration of H.R. 1082, as well as Chair DeFazio's response, expressing appreciation for his willingness to work cooperatively on this legislation. I have no further speakers on this side. I reserve.
Without objection, the gentleman reserves. The gentleman is recognized.
Madam
The gentleman
Speaker, I'm prepared
from
to close.
Arkansas is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, in closing, H.R. 1082 will improve the safety of prospective rideshare passengers by prohibiting the unauthorized sale of ride-hailing signage. This legislation would also help protect all of our constituents as GAO analyzes the occurrence of assaults against both passengers and drivers of for-hire vehicles. Madam Speaker, I again thank Congressman Smith of New Jersey for his tireless efforts and urge support of this legislation. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Madam Speaker, in closing, this bill honors the memory of Samantha Josephson and takes steps to ensure that a similar tragedy does not occur. I urge my colleagues to support this important safety bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields.